Thanks to both of you for joining us today. Do get involved if you'd like. It's the usual way of doing that. Use Twitter if you like, tweet me at Colin Brazier Sky, or email longer form thoughts, news@sky.com. Let us know what you think as we're going through. We'll try and introduce some of your thoughts and ideas as we go along as best we possibly can. Andrea, let's begin with you. From a Christian perspective, you could argue, could you not, excuse me, and I'm sure some people do argue this, that the mere act of having a child and all the sacrifice that goes with having a child, in terms of a Christian conversion, that's as good as it gets. It makes people less selfish, it makes them think about other people, and you know what? Whatever it takes to introduce a child who wants one into their life is a good thing, a Christian act.
I think what we see here and in the clip that has just been shown is a push towards designer babies, towards designer families, and it's the last in or the latest rather, series in a long series of attempts to really push away and strike at the heart of a natural family, which is a child raised with his or her biological mother and father. And we're doing that increasingly in this country, increasingly in our laws, and that shatters the natural family. And this idea here that we have a shortage of sperm, when in fact what we have is a shortage of families for children, vulnerable children in our nation already, who desperately need homes, desperately need mums and dads for in order to be adopted or to be fostered. That's where a £70,000 grant should be placed. Sue Avery at the centre there, she wants Birmingham to be a brokerage centre. A brokerage centre? What does that sort of say about what a child is? A child is not an adult's right. No adult has a right to a child. A child is a gift. So I think here we're looking at very big ethical questions, but also this focus on an adult's desire, what an adult wants at all costs, without thinking about the welfare of the child.
Okay. Elaine Halligan, some really interesting points there. Let's pick up that brokerage idea, that we're turning children effectively into a commodity. And somebody can walk into this clinic in Birmingham, perhaps, you know, a woman who's reached a certain age and decides that, you know, she really wants to have a child for whatever reason. And she can stipulate what kind of profession the sperm donor came from, what kind of appearance, how tall they were, what ethnicity they are, what kind of hobbies they had. Some people will say there is a whiff here of eugenics.
I think designer babies, it's a bit of scaremongering. My own experience.
Well, it's a fact. That's on the menu. When you go to this clinic, you can choose.
But the norm is that most parents who are going down the fertility route do it because they're absolutely committed to having a family. It's their lifelong ambition to be a parent. And I think lucky you if you're in a secure relationship and it happens at the right time. And we know that a lot of working parents, it doesn't happen at the right time. Marriages are breaking down sooner. People maybe aren't working so hard in their marriages, but for whatever reason, a woman may be left in her mid-30s not able to find Mr. Right. But that doesn't stop her desire or her need to have a baby. And her biological clock is running. So what we say is it's far safer for the sperm banks to be set up and to raise publicity, which is great. It's great news that we're raising publicity because supply is absolutely not outstripping demand. Demand is greater than supply. So what I find in my experience working with families on a daily basis is that the parents or the families who will come, whether they're single sex, whether they're single parents or whether they're couples, will be absolutely devoted to getting the best out of family life. They get very committed emotionally and financially. If you've ever been down the fertility route clinic, these people are the most devoted parents we'll ever see. And I don't think we should be bashing or criticising or judging them. We should be supporting it. We live in a 21st century. The science, the technology is there to assist people who want to be parents. And who are we to kind of judge whether that's right or wrong?
Well, Andrew wants to judge, don't you? You want to judge who's fit to go through this process or not. I mean, experience teaches us, doesn't it, Andrea, that, as Elaine says, the kinds of parents who are going to benefit from these sperm banks, they're going to be committed.
Yes.
They're going to be conscientious.
Absolutely.
They're not going to be people who fall into an unwanted pregnancy. They really want this baby, and by Jove, they'll make a good job as parents.
I think that some of the examples that have been raised by Elaine there show the deliberate creation of a family without a father. so a fatherless family.
hold on a minute,
I think
yeah.
I think that has serious implications. But also, if we have
really want
such
to
wonderful and
question
committed
the-
parents,
You can do,
then
just
what
do.
I'd like to say about that is that we should be promoting fostering and adoption for all those children that desperately need a loving home with a mother and a father. This is what is beautiful. This is what is good. This is what is natural. This is what we need to do. That's really altruistic. That's how we consider the needs of the child and not the wants and the desires of adults at a time that they see fit and they want to control in order then to have a child. And we don't know the consequences for children. We don't know what's going to happen with children when they grow, when they actually don't understand where they come from, how they then are going to look for that. You know, this idea that sperm donors are going to describe what they're like, who they are, and that they could a woman can then choose the kind of donor she wants. This is real designer stuff.
All right,
It is.
Andrea.
And it's not natural.
Okay, hold that. Well, we'll come on to what's natural or not in just a second.
I wanted to say that we live in the 21st century, and thank goodness we live in a society where we're tolerant, where we're accepting of other people's beliefs and views, whether they be religious. And actually, the stereotypical 2.2 family with mum and dad no longer exists, and we really need to accept that. We will have single-sex couples.
Do you
flourish in
accept?
that
Hang on,
kind of
hang on.
environment.
Do you accept that it's not necessarily? And here, I choose my word very carefully
Yes.
here. Do you accept it's not necessarily an optimal situation?
It's a good question. I think families, children do thrive where they have a mother and where they have a father.
And where it's nice
Now,
and
we
simple
know,
and uncomplicated.
It's very simple, but we know over the last 2 decades how many separated families there are, how many parents there are bringing up children alone. Does that make them any worse parents? And I do think that parents are very creative. If you're a single sex or a mother working alone bringing up a family, you'll be very creative to make sure that there are male role models in the life. We all do that, maybe through godparents or through significant others. It takes a village to raise a family. And it's a very idealistic view to say that only people can have children when they're in a heterosexual relationship with mum and dad. It's not reality now.
Andrea says, I'm just paraphrasing what you said a while earlier, she says, we can't have a situation where everybody views it as a right to have a child. Do you think everybody's got a right to have a child?
I think in the 21st century, when we have developed so much in terms of modern medicine...
Paedophiles? Mass murderers? Everybody's got a right to have a child.
I think there are always exceptions to the norm.
Okay.
And I think we need to be very clear here that there's a lot of parent bashing going on. Do you remember the riots in 2011 in Croydon?
I do. I was,
you were probably there broadcasting. We parent bashed to the nth degree. We blamed the parents. We said there was a moral vacuum missing. What I can absolutely guarantee is people do not bring a child into this world without giving it a lot of thought if they've gone down the fertility route. And if we're trying as a society to really support our future generation and ensure that we bring up our children and parents in a loving, supportive, nurturing, connective environment, then that can happen in a multiple facet of situations.
Andrea, you are swimming against the tide on this, aren't you? You accept that?
I think that this is a great untried experiment. What we know serves our children best is for them to be raised with their biological mother and their biological father.
Well, that's all fine, isn't it? That's all fine in theory. There's lots of longitudinal studies that show that marriage is great for kids. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't stay married. So what do you then do? Of course, we have to make the best of the situation that we're in, however we find our circumstances. But actually to create situations where children are fatherless, to actually create something out of an adult's desire, rather than really considering what is best for the child, knowing if it's the adult's desire to have children, and so on, that there are thousands and thousands of children in our nation alone who need a loving home, then why would we go to a brokerage place to select a sperm that we think best suits our lifestyle at a time that best suits our lifestyle, and create a designer family in our choice and not our natural family? Let's get you to talk to each other a little bit and address the questions that you're raising.
Thank you.
Elaine, well, no, Elaine, I want you to address this question that Andrea's raising there. Look, no, hang on. I haven't put the question. Which is, she's saying, look, if you can't have a child, don't resort to science. There are thousands of children out there who need great homes to be adopted. Start there.
I think it's absolutely a question of choice, Andrea. And of course, people do have a choice. They can go down the adoption route, which is equally can be as emotionally traumatic as the fertility route. But given that we live in a society where it is all about choice, let's give people the choice of what they want to do. And this design a baby argument, it is scaremongering. Okay, there is exceptions to the norm, but it's absolute scaremongering. People will go down the route of having a baby using either IVF, depending on what their religious beliefs are, or using donor sperm donation. And we support that
wholeheartedly. It's not a choice for the child, though, is it? It's not a choice for the child.
But hold on,
it's not a choice for the
child
child to be born into a situation where they will not know their biological father unless they go through a series of tests later in life, or a series of approach.
I think if we just look
that is the intentional deprivation of a father to a child. That's actually very serious.
I think
it's
if
a
we
very
just look
serious
at
thing to embark
what a child
upon.
actually needs. A child needs a loving, supportive environment, and it sounds to me as if we're saying that loving, supportive environment cannot be provided unless there's a mother and a father. Gosh, I think that's such a damning claim on all those single parents.
I'm not saying that entirely, because what I'm saying is there are all sorts of circumstances that happen in life which mean that children then are raised in situations that perhaps without the natural biological mother. Of course that is the case, and we see many children raised extremely well in lots of different situations. The difference here is that we are deliberately creating a situation, an adult's wants-based situation that is a shift away from the natural family. To create that, to endorse that in our laws is not progressive in a 21st century at all. That's not a progressive 21st century
Andrea?
thing. It's actually regressive.
Andrea, just winding up this now. Elaine, give you the last word, 15 seconds.
I think the last word is that we've missed the whole point of this debate, and that is to give a huge shout out to those very generous sperm donors. And I think there's a big issue here, which is that we are struggling to get sperm donation. And I want to just give the most massive acknowledgement and praise to those very generous men who do it purely because maybe they're fathers themselves, maybe they've experienced parenthood, and they want to share that with other people.
Maybe you provoked some of them to email in. I do hope
so.
Elaine, Andrea, thanks both very much indeed. Really thought-provoking debate.